Okay, so Jake, I'm in a meeting, and there's been a lot of Zoom calls. This is a call with a group of people that I know pretty well. It's one of these, like I said, one of these days, just go, 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 go. And we're into the conversation, and everybody has good Zoom discipline, right? So they've got their video on, we're using the chat, we're asking questions. We've kind of got that protocol down because my company where I work is fully remote, fully distributed from the beginning, so no brick and mortar. So we've had to figure this out. But we're getting into a part of the conversation where I'm pretty confident that if we go that direction, we're going to run into some big problems. So I begin to argue aggressively for a point of view, which I always appreciate, and I think that I need to come to the meeting showing up like that. But apparently, I like to think about it in two parts: posture and position. My position, my point of view, my posture, the way with which I'm addressing the group. My posture started to slip into something that I felt was confident, clear, concise, and I definitely related my concern. Everybody else apparently thought, what the hell is wrong with Chris?
This is a podcast where two old friends, both Canadian, one black and one white, and both men, explore what it looks like to adopt the mindset of an inclusive society. Instead of asking, how do we get there, Jake and Chris discuss, what does it look like to act as if we're already there? Welcome to the Disorienting Dilemma.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
He's lost it, man. Like he's all in. He jumped in too far. Now he's angry. Why is he talking like that to somebody? He doesn't usually do that. And there was some reflection around that. And I thought, I want to talk to Jake about this because it is definitely on the topic of what is it like to live in an inclusive world, especially fully remote, fully distributed on a Zoom call, back-to-back Zoom calls. We're all in the Groundhog Day effect. And I learned later that my posture betrayed my position.
Okay, can I ask one other piece?
Yeah.
Everybody an equal in the meeting?
No, no.
Can I give another P word?
Power?
Oh, can I give you another one?
Oh,
we do this all day long. Also that privilege.
Yeah.
What are the privileges that you have in that space? I'm asking, I don't know.
Well, I'm one of the owners of the business. Okay. But honestly, in my defense, so for everybody listening, and you, Jake, we try to keep it really flat. So we just all act like there's no hierarchy and people say whatever they want. Like there's none of this kind of, oh, you can't say this, you have to act this way. Everybody says exactly what they think. But I think it works against me in this situation because I can't say what I think because of the power and privilege, right?
I think that's part of it. Interestingly enough, I was in a similar meeting, although my role was different in that meeting. I was facilitating. I was facilitating a meeting with the boss and other folks, and the boss was trying to solicit feedback and, said in the exact same way, tried to flatten it structurally. I want everyone just to say what they mean. I want you to forget that I'm the boss. I'm just sitting here in the room. I want to hear from everyone. I have a decision that I want to make, but I want to, and he was really encouraging people to come forward with their ideas. And in that moment, I had a cringe. I was like, I wish you didn't say that. But as a facilitator, I just let it go. And we were in circle. And we were working restoratively, taking a restorative approach to that meeting. And what happened was about 2 or 3 people later, the person said, I'm just going to stop you right there. And before I say my piece, I want to go back to what the boss said. I actually don't need you to be an equal. I need you to be the boss. And I need you to hear me as the boss because I don't just want to tell you this in general.
Yeah.
I want you to hear me from your position because you have the ability to make these changes. It was really powerful. As we continued around through the rest of that circle, it encouraged people to speak their truth, but always recognizing that you have to show up in the space as who you are. Mm-hmm. And so when it came back around to the boss, he actually said, I want to be heard differently. You're right. I don't get to take that off, that responsibility that I'm coming in. I have a decision. He had a different relationship with what he was going to do with all of the information. He wasn't just asking for it, he had to action it and apply it. And so I'm just thinking about that in terms of, you want to be heard, but you are still the boss. How do you balance that?
I know it when I see it. You'll see it. I've seen it from other individuals, and you see it in a movie or whatever. This guy or woman just calmly taking it all in, not overreacting, playing the role, but in a way that isn't a rude or obscene exercise of power over other people and the conversation. Just when I'm in it, I'm just thinking about the position, the point of view that needs to be argued. That's my job. The role is a job too that I've let go of, obviously, in that moment. Forget the role, just thought about completely the point of view. But then it's just this dimension, because I'm thinking all the time now about, obviously not in the moment, but inclusive space, safe space. And I think about a phrase that you talk a lot about, which is creating safe space or a psychological safety in order to be able to contribute. And you're in situations a lot where people have very, very heated points of view and diametrically opposed. There's not going to be like, oh, let's, all come to the same perspective. That's not going to happen in the meeting. How do you maintain that inclusivity, even as a facilitator?
By shifting the principle. So from inclusivity to accessibility, that I hope aspirationally that I can create an inclusive space where people feel that way. But how do I do that? By ensuring that the way the meeting is facilitated is accessible enough for people to share their truth. And so it is about creating some ways of connecting around the issue that is not relying on someone is right and someone is wrong or shifting. It does require us to have equal access to the space, though, to the talking. So one of the practices, so in working restoratively, one of those practices, sort of the how, right? The shortcut is people sit in circle, and why we ask certain questions are all to the end of facilitating accessible spaces. This is what it means to be safe. So it's interesting that when you set it up, Chris, you say, I'm going in to have a different perspective, to intentionally, I suspect it's to intentionally bring a perspective that maybe they're not going to think about, and they're going to be pushing back. And so you're creating tension. That doesn't mean we avoid tension. Tension is good. I think tension is exactly what we need, but how do we do it without burning the house down?
Sure.
That is, I think, the facilitative model. It is that someone actually has to play referee. If you're going to play on the field, you can't also be the referee. And so the beauty of a facilitated meeting, often when we give up power, this is why I end up going to facilitate some meetings sometimes, and the boss feels like I don't have to be the boss. I just want to be a participant. No, you get to still be the boss. You're just not the meeting facilitator. I understand that there's a difference. And so if the idea is that we want to get people talking and sharing perspectives because the boss has to do something with it, well, then there's a freedom of not having to facilitate that because I want as many opinions as possible. This is that idea of being broadly consultative, hearing from a range of different perspectives. So you're intentionally going out and soliciting that feedback. And you're asking it from a human perspective because you're trying to figure out, to your exact point, how are people feeling right now?
So as you were saying that, Jake, a light bulb went off in my mind, and it was like, oh, I can see. And then from across the room, somebody threw a brick and the light bulb went out. So let me explain what I mean by that. Because the light bulb moment is, when I'm working with clients or groups that are a little bit further away, like we are working together, but I'm not necessarily on their team, I get to play a facilitator role. In a room with 20 people, when they've hired me as a consultant, I definitely have a point of view, but they all want to hear it. They're paying for it. But I'm not arguing with the room. It's me kind of coaxing out a perspective and finding alignment and what do we really want to do and what's not being said. I'm 100% facilitator, and that works really, really well. But on my own team or internal teams where I'm working closely with groups of people and I feel like it's us, like I'm kind of on a slightly tighter ring of in-group, and they say something that I think they should know, well, we don't do it that way. You can't just, okay, where's this coming from? Like, I would never do that in the facilitator role. So are you suggesting that maybe one way to deal with these internal meetings where we have these tight connections, where this kind of thing can happen, would be to assign someone in the group the role of facilitator, or move it around, provide some guidance as to what it is or whatnot? Or how do I do it?
As you were describing how it feels, I feel very much the same way when I'm working with my team, the folks I work with every day, and I get to be the boss feels very different than when I get to be the consultant. 100% agree. I try not to facilitate as often the meetings where I have to be the boss. So day to day, I have someone else take those. And the role of the facilitator is to manage the meeting, to ensure people are heard, to go around the room, to check in with, to do the frame up. So, in my world, that's a guy named Joe. Joe will go around and check in with everyone, make sure everyone's participating, or at least has the option to has the opportunity to be heard by each other and by me. That I have an opportunity to speak. He also frames it up so that I don't have to carry that weight.
Did Joe get any training for that, or did he just see you do it a lot?
So he sees me do it, but what we did is we went to those principles.
Oh, okay.
So there wasn't a whole lot of training required if we said the guidepost for this is participation, and that participation has to feel accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody. That's me, and that's the person that's been there 15 years, the person that's been there 15 minutes. Everybody gets to participate. And one way you can participate when it's your time to speak, you could say pass, and we'll honor that.
Okay.
So the three ways you participate. So my boss he says, you show up, be friendly, and try. Those are the 3 rules. You got to show up. Mm-hmm. Show up physically, show up mentally, show up emotionally. You got to show up. In friendly, it kind of structures it in terms of this relational model, and then you have to just try. You have to throw it out. There is some risk to that, and people will eventually get to the try when they feel safe and comfortable. So it's not uncommon for people to just say, I think I'm just listening today. That's great. You are participating. You will spend more time listening than you will speaking as we facilitate a meeting where everyone speaks, or at least everyone has an opportunity to be heard. Over and over, there's a bit of muscle memory that, people remember the order, they get into it. There is a bit of a rhythm to our meeting, and people know every single time we get together, I'm going to get a chance to speak. Someone's going to ask me, what do you think? I'm not going to have to elbow my way in. I can just wait for my turn because I have a lot of confidence. My turn's coming. I don't have to fight for it. I'm going to have my say. And what I do with it, I can pass or I could say it. What you said in the initial part when you're telling your story really resonated with me on a relational piece when people were surprised.
Yeah.
What's wrong with Chris? What? This is so unlike him. We start to try and interpret it in the context of knowing people. And because we're relational, this seems so out of character. I wonder what's behind that. I wonder why. Is he having a bad day? The more we do it in this way allows us to build those connections between each other so that we can understand it. You can kind of anticipate how people are going to show up when you don't have to fight for it, when you're not feeling personally attacked, when you don't allow the meeting to gang up. Your only job is to come speak your truth. It's not to convince anybody.
So you're saying if you principalize the meeting and you listed some of the principles around accessibility and in being inclusive and whatnot and how to make that work, but then even those principles applied to the tools that you gave your facilitator. So how it's structured to have a facilitator, what the facilitator ensures, and then the perspective of the participants showing up, they know I will get a chance to contribute. There is an expectation of being friendly in posture. I don't need to feel like I won't be heard or whatever it may be. But you've put enough pieces in play that I could go into a meeting like that and not become the worst version of myself because I just don't feel like people are getting the point I'm making. And if we don't get the point,
Yeah.
having been down that road, I know it's just going to fail.
So I have four work groups. They all work different shifts. We make the effort to sit with every work group on their first day back. They work 4 days in a row, then they're off for 4.
And so for our listeners, I just want to interrupt and say, unlike me, where I meet with hundreds of people over the course of a week from all over the world, but meet nobody in person here in Baltimore, Jake, you have a nice combo of both, but your 4 groups, you meet with them. When you say you meet with them, do you meet with them in person or online or a combo right now?
It's a combo.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
a combo. It's a combo because most of my staff are located in Halifax, where I am. Not all. So we always have someone remote. They're about an hour and drive away, just outside. So there's always someone on the screen. But because of COVID, we've had to limit it anyway. So we have more people participating in what we have our virtual check-ins or our virtual circles. But we do it. I sit in these 3 times a week for about an hour. It is the same meeting 3 times a week.
Yep.
For me and for Joe and for my boss. Now, everyone else rotates through. But this was a huge investment for us because it would have been even easier to just send an email. But what we were trying to overcome at the time when we started doing this about 1.5 to 2 years ago with this level of intention was some of the feedback. No one ever tells me what's going on. I never see them. That's the management. I never get to talk to you unless it's about something negative. I feel disconnected from where we're going. So we said, what if we were going to invest the time that we will spend on all of these problems? What if we got to invest that in a 3-hour block, 1 hour for each shift, and we will sit down with that work group and say, go through these this check-in. We ask them the same types of questions. We tell them we use it for information sharing. We ask for their feedback on it. We use it for training. We maximize that hour together, and then we make sure, because of having 4 different work groups, that we don't want to have 4 different versions of the same business unit. So we try to keep it very tight to, if we talk to shift A, B, C, and D, shift A and shift B, the plan for that meeting, the questions we ask, the information we share is exactly the same. But I can tell you, setting into 3 different meetings a week, they all feel different because the dynamics are different. People show up, and it's just a lot of fun. And it's a great investment, although it is an investment of time and intention.
Yeah, because I think it sounds to me like the big thing that you're building, and I'm thinking of some of the other meetings that I'm in as well, it's a building trust, laying foundation versus just efficient distribution of information. And that allows me to take action, get things done much better. Okay, so you want to know about the brick from across the room that broke my light bulb?
Yeah.
So we've been talking about a power structure of that involved privilege, but also position, and I'm the boss, and the entire team isn't the boss. What about when I'm not the boss and I'm sitting in a room, and let's say that the powers that be aren't really following through on the restorative approach. They've never met you. They don't even know what that term means. So now I'm in a room, and I am very aware of the women in the room who are Black, the number of white folk, the majority of whom are women, is like 30 people in the room, and we're peers. The boss is there, but we're peers. How do I still argue my point, but in a way that feels like I'm being psychologically safe, especially if the opposing point of view is held by a group that is not privileged? Like they're like the Black women, for example. I don't know. I see, even now, I love, by the way, for all of our listeners, I love the tagline for the show, learning to live in an inclusive world. The idea is that it's not inclusive, and even if it was, nobody would really know how to do it very well because we haven't been able to practice a truly inclusive, equitable society. So I hope it's okay to everybody who's listening to hear me confess that in a situation where you might be thinking, oh my gosh, just don't be a jerk and listen and go with, I'm trying to be real about and remember situations I've been in. So does that make sense, Jake? Is that a fair example, or
Yeah, for
did I set it
sure.
up?
Yeah, I think in exactly the same way that you can't not be the boss. When I sit in a circle, I can't not be a person who identifies as a black male. And I live in Nova Scotia. We identify as African Nova Scotian. That's how I show up. So it's not just position. It's not just the privilege. I think the weightiness of allowing people, whether it's your position or it's your identity, to show up in space, and that we read things through that lens. We know that everyone's going to experience it that way. So in order to facilitate accessible spaces, I'm asking people to show up speaking their truth from their perspective. That can be influenced by role, identity, probably both. And so here's what's kind of interesting, and it doesn't happen overnight. If you create these spaces frequently enough, people start to believe you when you say it's accessible. So some of the techniques and strategies that folks have had to use in order to be heard, historically marginalized folks who we haven't always had a voice at the table.
Yeah, I'm tracking.
Sometimes get accused of being angry, being loud, being argumentative. And so part of a lived experience, some of those things, whilst they are not true, can come through in that way and be read in that way, that can look like it's being hostile or difficult. I have really found that in sitting in truly inclusive spaces that are not just aspirational, but it takes the action and attitude shift to create it. It takes the intention to say, we are going to do this. These are the ways that we're going to ensure that this space is accessible to folks in terms of speaking their truth. That as a byproduct, it will be inclusive. Some of that stuff will actually fall away. People will not have to show up in ways that maybe they have in other spaces.
Because it's like training wheels, and once you internalize it, you can. It's more elastic. You can do more with it, but it feels rigid in learning.
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong to be sort of asking yourself that question when you're hearing a different perspective, and it's from a person who's been from a historically underrepresented or marginalized group. I don't think, and it might be different from yours, I don't think you're wrong to say, to feel a bit awkward by that. How do I, or uncomfortable? I don't think that's wrong at all.
The logical conclusion is then I can see my white male cis privilege as an encumbrance. Because so if you will entertain the craziness of what I'm about to say. So I've grown up my entire life. You say what you think. I've never been aware of my own privilege or power or anything like that. Just the world works for me better than it does for other people. So as I'm talking, now I realize, whoa.
Yeah.
I've got a whole bunch of hurdles to overcome for the folks in this room. You have power, you have privilege, you got all these other things. And then these, the poor black woman in the room who, as you've said, has got to speak up if she wants to be heard, because not only in her life, but for the many lives lived before her ancestors, this has not been the case. So I get all that. That's the reality, but it's insane that I'm beginning to see the awareness of the privilege as now an obstacle, because I can't just say what I think, and I'm looking at her, and she is just saying what she thinks, because she doesn't really have to worry about it. Now, as soon as I say that out loud,
okay, there you get there.
As soon as I said it, it's coming. It's coming to me. Okay, yep. Nope. That's the kind of stuff I have to undo in my head. I almost have to read my thoughts to the dog to hear when I hit the little logical fallacy or the crazy part of the thinking that I've just adapted to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a response to fragility.
Yeah.
Right? It's a response The overarching assumption has been that the loudest voice in the
Yep.
in the room works, is right. The boss is always right, and having to confront fragility, having to confront that some of that may not be accurate, feels weird. And I think it's just about powering through that. What are the strategies you're going to employ to work through those feelings? And I would only push back and say, I don't think people just get to say everything that they want to say.
That's fair. I mean, there's sort of
Yeah.
a super human level of this whole thing where we're just not going to let anything fly, because totally get that. But I want to go back to what you just said about fragility, specifically white fragility, because maybe not everybody who's listening to this is aware of what the term means. They've probably heard it, but not sure what the term means. I think I described the term very well. Like, I'm standing there in the room, 52 years old. I'm senior executive, and I'm used to people listening to what I have to say. And then somebody, let's say there's a facilitator. Jake, let's say you have trained a facilitator. Let's say your friend Rob. Joe's sitting there, and Joe goes, well, thanks for sharing, Chris. I think we're going to go over and talk to Linda and see what Linda thinks. And I'm like, whoa. I don't think everybody's heard well, Chris, let's just give everybody else a chance to talk here. You're not the only one in the room. We're going to go to Linda next. Fragility would be me thinking, what is going on around here? These meetings used to take less time, be more productive, and we got things done. Now we have to that's what, when we say white fragility, it's that reaction to, oh my gosh, I have privilege. This isn't fair, which everybody else is saying too. Yeah.
Which has been, that's it.
Yeah. You're right. You do have privilege, and it's not fair. Welcome to the party. No. You're not seeing what I'm saying. It's not equal. Yes, that is what we're saying too. But I want to just say whatever I think. So in all of this, Jake, let's take a peer-to-peer situation. We're all in the same team. We're in the workplace. We're at a church. We're at a mosque. We're, I don't know, doing mall walking. And we've got to make some decisions as a group. And let's say we have a facilitator or whatnot, and I'm in that group, and I am aware of all of this stuff that's going on. I'm aware of all the conflicting things inside of me: power, privilege, historic, systemic racism, my white fragility. And I'm aware of all that, and I still get it wrong with people. I really do have the intention that we're on the right track, and I have an intention to be inclusive, but it doesn't go that way. And I just, honestly, though, my first reaction is to go back and say, guys, because we talked about this just a few minutes ago. We talked about trust. These meetings are about building trust so we can trust each other and move on that. Is there no place for the other group, and I'm using that phrase intentionally, to be okay with it, to create accessible space for me to make mistakes? Like, what's the give and take there? Can I just say, oh, guys, you know me. If that's how it came across, I want to acknowledge that, accept it, own it, change it, but don't write me off, right? Like, that's where it starts to feel, that's the stuff that you run over in your mind. Like, what are people thinking about me? Do they think I'm this person? They had such a strong reaction to it. Like, do people think I'm a monster? Am I a monster? Like, where? I don't even know how to ask the question. What's the role for everybody in the inclusive world?
I think that's the right question. So whether you have a formal facilitator or you are, the hard part about this is sometimes you have to almost self-facilitate. So it's the same principles. Am I being accessible? Am I making sure people are being heard? Am I paying attention to all of the different perspectives and trying to make this an inclusive, not just meeting, but space in terms of connection, interaction. Mm-hmm. So whether you and I are talking and I'm trying to make sure that you have all the time in the world to say it, there is this background track where I'm asking, are you okay? Right? So how are you feeling? This is where we start to recognize, and we can, going back to our very first conversation about meetings, what we lose in a Zoom call are some of those tells that maybe a person's uncomfortable. It's that foot tapping on the floor. It's the I want to be anywhere but this meeting. As soon as the the boss says we're done, I'm getting out, I'm hitting the door, right? It's how fast can you hit that leave button in the Zoom call?
Yeah.
You know when someone's not had a good experience. How do you know when you failed at making it an inclusive space? I think the tell is that you have a sense that people are harmed, that people are hurting. So how do you make it right after that is checking in. What do you need? My goal was always to try and create inclusive spaces where people feel heard. I feel like you left that last meeting without being heard. I'm feeling that. I could be wrong, but I wanted to check in about it. So that's the role of a facilitator. If you don't have a facilitator, that's the role of the person who's caused harm. Very rarely, though, so is it just a two-party thing? I do a lot of work where someone will invite me into a company to resolve a conflict between two parties. And I often will say, I'm happy to do that, but the third party is always the most influential. It's everybody else who saw that happening. It's everybody else to say, I want to check in with everyone. And how do you move the two people on either side of the conflict? You actually grab the rest of the room and say, so last Wednesday, we're just going to go back to that. How did that feel for folks?
No.
Because
No.
I know you don't want to do it.
No.
It's fragility again. It's it's checking in for some more feedback.
Oh, no.
It's checking
No.
checking in.
This can't be where our podcast is going today.
It's checking in to see if it's an earnest and honest attempt to make sure that we build understanding about what happened versus just teach a lesson or be defensive. The easiest way to do that is for you to say, come on, guys, you know me.
Yeah.
You know me.
Okay, good.
You know,
I could
come
do
on,
that?
you know me.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
that's the wrong way.
That
is the wrong way. Come on,
is
you
there
know
anybody
me, you
else
know
there
me.
that we can ask this question of? Like,
We have to build understanding to move past it. Did I get that wrong? And there's a moment of vulnerability. I think in these kind of circumstances, it's probably not a self-facilitated meeting.
yeah.
Those are the. I need to hear. I was left feeling. You can use a lot of I statements. I was feeling that people weren't heard at the end. I've been feeling like this because, and in the future, I want to make sure that we don't leave meetings where people are feeling silenced. How do we solve that? What would have helped? What could go differently? There are ways to ask those type of restorative questions. Those questions are equally accessible to everybody in that space. You don't have to be the boss. And they're answering those because you're trying to collectively solve a problem. How do you make this a more inclusive space? The trusting that people know you and know that your intentions are good and that you didn't mean to hurt, I don't think will go very far. They tend to start being excuses. Might explain it, might explain that there's no malice behind what happened, but at the end of the day, people were hurt or harmed potentially. And it's trying to understand what's behind that. What do you need to move forward? What do you need to not be hurting right now?
And I think the way you said that made me think, the quality of character, the nature of a relationship, our connection to each other should support my attempt at recognition with the room rather than acting as an excuse so I should be able to get away with some bad behavior. And in the moment, I felt so embarrassed and so bad when somebody told me that this had actually happened because I was unaware. I immediately wanted to just get away, like get out of that moment any way I can and say, do people not know me? And use my character as an excuse for bad behavior rather than as proof of the sincerity of acknowledging my bad behavior. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. It's relational currency, right? You're trying to spend that relational capital. That's not how you get out of it.
No, that's the wrong way to spend that capital. You're right. Like this shouldn't bother anybody because I'm a good guy. Hey.
Yeah, I've got enough in the bank to overcome that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You have to do the hard work like you're broke.
Yeah.
Like you've got no relational capital because you won't in time.
Yeah.
If you don't fix it.
Well, okay, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel a bit like I was treating you like a therapist, but I had thought so much about it. I wanted to hear how you thought about it. Like I wanted you to take it and of course you're only getting it from my perspective, and we all acknowledge that on this call, but I took that moment as a real opportunity to think through what would it look like to have that experience in a more inclusive society where the inclusive and equitability was more normal and more pervasive than it is even now. I just wanted to jump ahead in time, see what that was like, and see if I could bring any of it back here. And I feel like I've gotten some things that I want to work through. So thank you for thinking that through with me. And thanks everybody listening in as well. We'd obviously love to hear any thoughts you might have about this or any experiences you've had. Or again, did we miss something? Should we have added something that we mentioned? Or maybe you have a different point of view. And I hope you believe that we're open to some of your different points of view. No, actually, just share anything. Right, Jake?
Anything at all. And be sure to join us next week as we explore yet another disorienting dilemma facing us as the, whatever.
This podcast is brought to you by the RW Institute, produced by Daniel Parker, recorded remotely in Los Angeles from Baltimore, Maryland, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with the conversation. Care to react? Submit your comments at rw.institute or on the comment feature where you're listening now.